Honourable member for Malpeque.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I too know that the remarks from the member from Bakerville were heartfelt on its impact in the farming community. We may disagree on the Canadian Wheat Board, and I would say this, that his government really killed the only entity that had the authority and the power to challenge the railways and the grain companies, and that was the Canadian Wheat Board. But we'll set that aside. There's been a number, and I really want to ask the member if he would consider some of these solutions, and I'd like to outline about 5, Mr. Speaker. The member from Wascana named a few earlier, but one was certainly doing what can be done immediately while there's still permafrost in the ground to get grain movement to the port at Churchill so it can go from there. Secondly, the member for Wascana mentioned making the definition of service explicit in that Fair Rail Service Act and make penalties under the law applied against railways that would compensate liquidated damages and pay them to the farmers rather than a fine paid to the government. I'd also suggest, Mr. Speaker, that they re-establish the BC Clearance Association, which the government killed in August of 2012. That association was responsible for coordinated ships coming into port 6 weeks in advance of the delivery of grain to port. That needs to be considered. They need to also learn from the logistics operation of the Canadian Wheat Board before it was the logistics in terms of collecting the grain inland in a coordinated way and targeted into the holds of ships in Vancouver. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, would they consider a grain transportation authority with some power to take charge and order, if necessary, certain things to happen with the grain companies and railways? Those are some proposals.
The honourable member for Bakerville-Weymouth. The honourable member for Wascana.
Mr. Speaker, at the end of 4.5 hours of debate, I wonder if we could agree that one thing we need to do is amend the level of service legislation to provide for liquidated damages payable directly to farmers when railways fail to deliver on their service level commitments. Secondly, the government needs to assist the railways to make sure that they have adequate locomotive power and railway rolling stock and trained personnel to move the maximum volume. Thirdly, could we agree that we need full transparency for the total volumes of grain booked to be shipped through West Coast ports, transparency about the time frames for those shipments, and the number of marine vessels that have in fact been ordered to take delivery? Could we agree that we need to provide some sensible business-like coordination throughout the system to replace the kind of chaos that we've seen over the last 6 to 8 months? And could we agree that the government should table a plan to maximize throughput through Vancouver, Prince Rupert, Churchill, especially while the permafrost is in place, and also south through U.S. facilities if that is in fact necessary? Could we agree at the end of this discussion, Mr. Speaker, that those are very simple, practical, reasonable steps that need to be taken to alleviate the pressure in the system at the earliest possible moment, and we have to act as a Parliament long before any 5-year study that would put this solution off into Never Land. The problem is now, the crisis is now, the government needs to move now, not 5 years from now.
Excellent. Honourable Deputy de Vaudreuil-Soulanges.